Tsale, are you ready for some dramatized history? Imagine a king and his son, the prince, fighting over the same woman. This is the opera Don Carlo. It is loosely based on some real characters who existed in the 1500s. The King of Spain, his son, Don Carlo, but of course, it's highly dramatized. Music composed by the great Italian maestro, Giuseppe Verdi. The opera was originally written with a French libretto and later translated to Italian, and it's mostly performed in Italian. This opera is a perfect example of how some composers and librettists would use their art to express their displeasure with the political and religious status quo. It's a multi-layered storyline, so I'll have to eliminate some of the details, but let's stick with the crux of the story. If you're wondering why I'm wearing an eye patch for this, well, it's a sleep mask, but you get the idea. It's a tribute to my favorite character from this opera, Princess Eboli. She's often depicted as an aristocratic extrovert who wears an eye patch. It adds to her mystique. It gives her a certain je ne sais quoi. Remember Princess Eboli, and let's get into the story. Don Carlo is the Prince of Spain, the son of the King of Spain. As part of a peace treaty between Spain and France, an arrangement has been made for Carlo to marry Princess Elizabeth de Valois, the daughter of the King of France. Remember, this is an arranged marriage, so Elizabeth and Carlo have never met. Risky, right? I mean, what if they end up hating each other? Or there's no attraction whatsoever? Would you marry a stranger just to keep the peace between two countries? Anyway, Carlo and some of his boys have traveled to France. They're gonna chill, they're gonna hang out. While he's there, he spots Princess Elizabeth from a distance and he is smitten. He's like, Tsale, I hit the jackpot. The girl is fine. Later on, Carlo and Elizabeth actually meet face to face. And as it turns out, the attraction is mutual. They're excited about the prospect of getting married. I mean, they've chosen their wedding colors, they've planned their honeymoon, they've even decided how they're going to do their gender reveal when they have their babies. It's that deep. But their excitement was short-lived. A messenger comes to inform Elizabeth that, contrary to the prior arrangement, she will now be marrying not Carlo, but his father, the King of Spain. The lovebirds are heartbroken. Elizabeth can't believe she's losing her Prince Charming, and Carlo can't believe he's losing his dream woman to his father. Needless to say, Carlo is furious. He's totally against this new arrangement and he's determined to fight it. But Elizabeth decides that her duty to her country is far more important than her attraction to Carlo. And she agrees to marry the king for the sake of peace. Would you do it? Carlo cannot believe what's happening, so he goes back to Spain and he goes to a monastery to go and cry his eyes out about losing Elizabeth. Now, this is the monastery where the tomb of the Emperor Charles V is held. Now, the Emperor Charles V is Carlo's late grandfather. So basically, the emperor is the father of the current king, right? Now, while Carlo is over there shedding tears over Elizabeth, one of the old monks in the monastery comes out. And Carlo is like, hey, this guy kind of looks like my late grandfather. Oh. Carlo was a bit confused, maybe because he was so upset, he was hallucinating, who knows. Anyway, while he was trying to figure out whether or not he was seeing a ghost, his friend Posa comes around. Posa is kind of quietly leading a rebellion against the Spanish king. Posa wants to liberate the Flemish people in Flanders. This is like present-day Belgium. Flanders was under Spanish rule, but obviously they wanted liberation from the Spanish king. Posa, seeing that Carlo is upset, is like, Tsale, Carlo, what's wrong? Carlo confides in him that the woman he loves is now going to be his stepmother. Posa is like, oh, Tsale, okay, yeah, that sucks. But really, there's nothing you can do about it. Your father is a tyrannical bully, so you might as well clear your mind off this woman and focus on more important things, like liberating the Flemish people. Fix yourself up and let's go and lead an insurrection. So Carlo wipes his tears, they shake on it, and he's like, let's do this. And they become ride or die allies. Now let's introduce my favorite character, Princess Eboli. She's a hot mess, but I love her. And her diva eye patch, and the arias that she sings in the opera. Now, Eboli and some other ladies are hanging around the garden when Elizabeth comes around. Remember, Elizabeth is now the queen. By this time, she has married the King of Spain. Shortly thereafter, Posa also comes around, and he gives some letters to Elizabeth. Among those letters is one letter from Carlo asking Elizabeth to meet him in a secret place. Gradually, all the people in the garden go their separate ways, and Queen Elizabeth is left there alone. And who comes out of the shadows professing his undying love for her? Yep, none other than Mr. I can't take no for an answer, Don Carlo. By now, Elizabeth is so over him and she's just focused on being the Queen of Spain. So right now, she's not impressed by this whole emotional blackmail thing that Carlo is trying to do. She basically blasts him, and Carlo's so shocked that he just runs away. Just as Carlo leaves, the king shows up and he's like, "Hey, Elizabeth, what are you doing here in the garden alone? Like, you're supposed to have a lady in waiting. Where is she? What's going on? I smell a rat." Elizabeth is like, "Oga, relax. There's nothing to see here." Like, the king is so upset that Elizabeth is alone in the garden that he actually fires her attendant eventually. Elizabeth goes off to go and do queenly things, and Posa, who has been hanging around, comes out. He and the king strike up a conversation. I've got to give it to Posa. Posa is bold. Posa basically says to the king, "King, listen, why don't you let the Flemish people go free? Like, let them have their independence." King is like, "Nah, son, but you're very courageous for asking me. I like your spunk, but be careful. I might like you, but those leading the Inquisition do not take kindly to people who oppose the monarchy and the church." Posa is like, "All right, king, thanks for the heads up." Then the king says, "No problem, but could you do me a favor?" Posa says, "Sure, what's up?" King says, "Could you keep an eye on my wife? I'm not comfortable with her interactions with my son, Carlo." Posa, being a good friend, says, Oh, king, but why would you say such a thing? There's nothing going on between Carlo and the queen. Don't worry, everything's under control, but I will keep an eye on her, just like you asked." The king is happy to hear this, and they part ways amicably. Now let's skip to some kind of royal party they were having at the palace. This party involves some masks or costumes or whatever. Elizabeth is in there. She's like, "Charlie, this party sucks. I just want to go outside and go and breathe some fresh air." So she calls Eboli over. She says, "Eboli, can we switch outfits? I want to get out of here for a bit." Eboli says, "Sure." Now, all this while, Eboli has been snooping around and doing her own research, and she has figured out that Carlo has a crush on Elizabeth. She's jealous because she, Eboli, has a crush on Carlo. So when Eboli switches clothes with Elizabeth, Eboli now sends a note to Carlo asking him to meet her in the garden. Now, she sends the note as if she were Elizabeth because she knows that if she sends a note like she's Elizabeth, Carlo will come. Carlo is excited at the prospect of meeting Elizabeth, so of course he rushes to the secret place to meet up with her, not knowing that it's Eboli. Carlo arrives at the secret meeting place and he immediately starts professing his love for Elizabeth again. But it's Eboli who's standing there. He realizes this too late. By this time, Eboli is threatening to report Carlo to the king. Carlo starts begging her, "Eboli, I beg you, don't tell my father." Then here comes best friend Posa to the rescue. Posa stops Eboli in her blackmailing tracks. And he says, "Kwe, Eboli, if you don't know and you go and snitch, I will destroy you. And the only thing that will be left will be this eye patch that you're always wearing around." My girl Eboli is furious and she leaves the scene in frustration. Posa is like, "Carlo, you better watch your back. Now Eboli knows your secret, and goodness knows what she's going to go and tell your father." Now, Carlo goes to find his father. And remember, the Spanish Inquisition is going on, so there are some prisoners who are about to be executed in public. Carlo approaches his father and says, "Dad, wouldn't you just consider freeing the Flemish people?" His father says, "Get out of here with that nonsense." Now, that reaction triggers Carlo's anger. And without even thinking, he pulls out his sword. Now, what do you think happens if you pull out a sword in anger in the presence of a king? Luckily for Carlo, before the king's guards could lynch him, good old Posa disarms him, takes the sword, and Carlo is arrested. King Felipe is so grateful to Posa that he actually gives him a promotion. But now his own son, Carlo, is in prison, awaiting his fate. The king goes to his bedroom hoping to get some rest, but let's face it, he's had a rough day. He thinks his wife doesn't love him anymore. He thinks his son was trying to kill him. I mean, King is stressed. He's in no mood for visitors, but here comes the old, crusty Grand Inquisitor, calling on the king to execute his own son, the heir to the throne, Carlo. The Grand Inquisitor is clearly not a peacemaker. He's a peace breaker, killing people for fun with his crusty self. He actually had the nerve to say that God sacrificed his son for mankind, so the king shouldn't hesitate to sacrifice his son for the good of the church and the state. Can you imagine the audacity? But the sad thing is, the king actually considered this suggestion. Then the Grand Inquisitor also says that the king should allow him to deal with Posa. The Grand Inquisitor hates Posa because of Posa's role in trying to liberate the Flemish people, so he wants to eliminate him. This is where the king finally grows a backbone and says, I kind of like Posa. Posa is like the son I wish I had, so please, you leave him alone. The Grand Inquisitor is like, okay, but you think about it. Then he leaves the king alone. At this point, Elizabeth enters the room looking very worried because she realizes someone has stolen her jewelry box. Can you guess the jewelry box thief? Yep, my girl, Eboli. You see, now we find out that Eboli is the one who sparked the king's jealous behavior. She saw a picture of Carlo in Elizabeth's jewelry box and she got so jealous. As revenge for her unrequited love, she decided to steal the jewelry box and give it to the king to tell him that something was going on between Elizabeth and Carlo, and that's how the king started getting all jealous. So the king brings out the box and says to Elizabeth, "Is this what you're looking for?" Elizabeth is stunned by the whole situation and she faints. The king is like, "Help, help!" And Eboli and Posa come rushing in. Posa is like, "King, I thought I told you not to dwell on this adultery thing. Nothing is going on between Elizabeth and Carlo." He's like, "Look, King, you come with me. Let's go and get some fresh air." After he exits with the king, Eboli starts to feel really bad about what she's done, and she confesses that she's the one who stole the jewelry box and gave it to the king. But wait, here's the kicker. All this while, Eboli has been scheming against Carlo and Elizabeth because of her jealousy, and the whole time, she has been having an affair with the king. She's the king's mistress. Eboli! Elizabeth is so disgusted with Eboli that she banishes her from the court. In fact, she doesn't ever want to see or hear of her in Spain again. She leaves Eboli alone to think about all of her dastardly deeds. And Eboli sings this aria about how her beauty always gets her into trouble. She's such a narcissistic troublemaker. I love her. Let's check on Carlo, shall we? Posa, the faithful friend, visits Carlo in prison and offers to make the ultimate sacrifice for Carlo. There's some incriminating evidence regarding the rebellion that Carlo and Posa have been supporting in Flanders. So Posa says he will take the blame for the rebellion and he will allow himself to be killed instead of Carlo. I mean, how many of us would do that for our friends? Before Carlo could even protest, the evil Grand Inquisitor's men sneak up on Posa and kill him. As Posa is dying, he tells Carlo to keep up the fight for liberation. In all this chaos, a crowd has amassed at the prison and they're demanding the release of Carlo. During this melee, Carlo is able to escape and he runs to the monastery where his grandfather's tomb is located. He gets there and Elizabeth is there praying. At this point, Carlo tells Elizabeth that he has finally gotten over her. He is no longer romantically obsessed with her and he only loves her as a son would love a mother. Elizabeth tells Carlo that he should keep up the fight to liberate the Flemish people in honor of Posa. Just as they're saying goodbye, the king arrives with the Grand Inquisitor and his men. And at that moment, the old monk, the one who bears a resemblance to the late emperor, appears from the monastery and embraces Carlo, pulling him into the monastery to protect him from his attackers. Or was it the ghost of the emperor welcoming Carlo to heaven? Oh, the drama. Oh, the intrigue. Oh, the music. That is Don Carlo. Cheers.